your Son's holy and blessed name. Amen.
Okay, if you don't have one of these packets, raise your hand, and I don't know where they got to, but make sure everyone gets one of these. This is going to be the all the handouts, all the things that we'll be doing, and get a pen too. If you don't have one, I think I see there are some in some of the pews, but my aim is to run today like I would run my Bible classes back home. So Kyle had this earlier, and he said there's going to be a test. Kind of. You'll see on the packet here that there are a list of objectives, and these are the things that I want you to be able to do when we leave. Now, whether or not I actually quiz you on those, we'll see. But I want you to have a pen and your packet and be following along as we go through, as well as discussing with each other and sharing out as we go. And it looks like everybody is sitting close enough to somebody to be able to discuss in groups when the time comes. Okay? But let's start with this. So this will be on page 2 for our 10 o'clock session here. But take a couple minutes, and you can do this on your own. Like I said here, the longest list wins. So you may not want to share your winnings with the person next to you, but you can whisper a little bit if you wanted to share some ideas. But the opening exercise is to do this and see how long a list you can come up with. All the various kinds of people that Jesus cared about, spent time with. Okay, think in terms of specific categories of people, and make as long a list as you can in 90 seconds here. All the various kinds of people that Jesus cared about. Do that, and then we'll see who has the most categories here in just a minute. Okay, anybody want to say they have the longest list? Anybody have, 10 or more? Okay. You're feeling good about yours? Okay. What about 15? Anybody 15? 12? Anybody have more than 12? 14? Kyle, how many? Yeah. Well, let's see, and then we know who to turn to if we start dragging and need more ideas. We know who the A students are here. But all right, let's go. Let's just share it out, yell it out, and see how long list we can all come up with. What'd you have?
The powerless.
Powerless. Okay, that's a little. The lame. Okay, the blind, poor, tax collectors, sinners, Pharisees, Sadducees. Prostitutes, children, homeless, Samaritans, demon-possessed, hungry, widows, Gentiles, Romans, zealots. We didn't make zealots. I'm thinking Romans and zealots. Those are two ends of one spectrum here. Okay. Yeah, the disciples, and I gave you zealots, but even within the apostles, they're fishermen, you could say, family. Okay? It's pretty good. We did pretty good. We're all winners. That's the, we'll do the YMCA model here. Today, we're all win. I know we don't like that, but yeah, that's right. Someone's got to win and someone's got to lose. That's just the way this goes, okay? Keep that in mind. I want to start with that to kind of get our brains thinking about the wide spectrum. And it is a spectrum. It's not just the folks that we think of as being down here. It really is, it's those down here, those up here, those over here, and those over here. A wide spectrum in multiple different ways that Jesus spent time with. Because we're going to be talking in this first session about compassion. I know this is a little out of order, but back on the front side of your packet, okay, are the 4 C's that we're going to use to structure our time together on Saturday, okay? I did not come up with these. These are from my friend Andy Cantrell, who preaches up in Minnesota, and he came up with these as basically 4 words. The fact that they all start with C is helpful, okay, for those of us that like that kind of thing. But basically 4 words that can encapsulate, on one hand, the negative side of this would be, these are if we came up with a list of reasons, excuses, reasons why we don't do this more often or aren't better at this, they would probably fall into one of these 4 categories, okay? Or on a more positive side, we say these are the 4 things that we're trying to develop as we go about doing what we talked about last night, sharing the good news with a lost world. So then I'll give them to you to start, and then you will be expected to tell me what they are as we go forward. The first is care or compassion. You can use either one. It's probably not helpful that I've switched it up here. Compassion is on your sheet for this first lesson, but care or compassion. We'll talk more about that over the next few minutes. Consciousness is the second, being aware of our roles and responsibilities, and we'll talk about that at the 11 o'clock hour. And then after lunch, we're going to talk about courage, getting over our fears to say something or to do what is necessary. And then the last one this afternoon will be our craft and our skill, okay? And that one, I will say, just as a way of preview, is probably the one that we think about the most. We think, I just don't know exactly how to have these conversations or navigate these situations. But I think all 4 of these really, as we'll see, are pertinent and important to be thinking about, starting with our compassion or our care, which is supposed to come up there, okay? Again, I'll give this to you. This was from last night, so if you weren't here or you've slept since last night, you probably didn't remember this. But our short little definition, the best we've come up with, or I've come up with for now, is this is what we're doing. We are inviting people to join us as disciples of King Jesus. Okay, so again, I'll give that to you now, and then you'll be able to tell me that when I ask you later on in the day. This is what we're doing, inviting people to become disciples of King Jesus. Okay, so let's start by talking about our care or our compassion. And I think this one may be particularly important for this reason. My guess is that if we went through these and I asked you which of these you're, have a harder time with, or which of these you feel like is most important for us or we're lacking in, it may be one of the other ones that we would say. Like I said, I don't know how to have these conversations. Or I think we would all admit that we need some courage in this area. But to me, compassion or care is one that we probably wouldn't be quick to say out loud, right? I don't know how many of us would say, yeah, I really just don't care about my friends and neighbors all that much, right? I don't have much compassion for the lost. I don't think we would ever say that, but I'm hoping that we'll be introspective over the next few minutes, because I know for myself, if I'm being honest, this is something I really need to grow in. Really hurting for people. Loving them the way Jesus loved people, and having that care, that compassion for them as people that have not yet experienced the blessings that Tim thanked God for in his prayer. Okay, so let's try to be reflective about that, be honest about that, and let's start with some group activity here and learn from Jesus. We're going to sit at his feet quite often over this weekend and think about the way that he interacted with people and how we can imitate that. So these are going to be the 4 groups. Let's do this. Let's make group 1. It's a little uneven here. So we'll start here, okay? And from this row forward, y'all will be group 1. The rest of you here will be group 2. Group 3 back here up to this row. And then group 4 from the Bozeman's up to the Lees. And you see on your worksheet and on the slide what your assignment is. Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and Group 4. And these are the questions that you're going to ask, okay? And just talk amongst yourself. You don't have to all turn and talk as one big group. You turn and talk to the people closest to you, but you know your assignment. Why is Jesus moved? Read the text together. Why is Jesus moved with passion or pity? What provokes that feeling within him? What does he do as a response to his feeling of compassion or pity? Okay. Why is this perhaps surprising that Jesus feels and acts the way that he does? And if we're in his shoes, how might we have reacted if we were in the same situation? Okay. So I'll give you, let's do 4 or 5 minutes here to talk amongst yourselves about your particular passage. Go ahead. Oh, Ben, that was the whole point of the groups, yeah. Your group is the number of passages that you have. Sorry that wasn't clear on my end. Okay. Let's share out. We'll do about 5 minutes per group, and that'll take us to the last few minutes of the session, and we'll maybe talk specifically about how we can grow in this area. Okay. But with each group, multiple people can speak up, but tell us kind of summarize the story, and then tell us some of the things y'all talked about in terms of why Jesus has moved, what he's moved to do, and the kind of surprising nature of that. From our perspective. Group 1, Matthew 9:36 to chapter 10. What y'all talk about?
Well, the story here, this little segment is about Jesus being moved with compassion when he sees the multitudes having basically no direction. They're just directionless without a shepherd to guide them.
Yeah.
And it says specifically they're weary and they're scattered. And so he talks about the harvest being plentiful, but there's few workers to bring in the harvest. And then he calls together his disciples and he gives them the power to heal all kinds of sicknesses and go about healing the people. So that's the scenario we're presented with. So why is Jesus moved? Because they were weary and scattered and directionless, we believe.
Hey, stop you here, Stephen. In 36, you're saying those are the two words. So my translation says harassed and helpless. What were the two words he used?
Weary and scattered.
Weary and scattered. Anybody looking at this verse is Matthew 9:36. Other words that your translation uses? Distressed and dispirited. Harassed and helpless. Weary and scattered. Any other words? Those are some powerful words to describe the situation of lost people, which, by the way, was us, okay? Unless we forget about that. And the situation of others outside of Christ. And that's why Jesus was moved. Okay, sorry, keep going, y'all. Something like that.
So he was moved to call his disciples together and give them the power to heal. So that's what he was moved to do on their behalf, it seemed to us in that passage. Why it was surprising, maybe it was such that it was surprising that he actually needed to call the disciples to do anything. That he was actually going to work through them when Jesus was powerful enough to do it himself. Is that the point you were making? So really, he was strong enough to do himself, but in terms of choosing the apostles to execute his will and use his power to heal, that was surprising that he would need to do that or choose to do that, I should say.
Yeah.
Something else that might be surprising is that the people that he was going to be healing would eventually be the ones that would choose to set him up to be crucified. So he's going to choose. He knows that. He's God. He knows what these people are going to likely do in the future. It may have been some of these very people, we don't know, that may have been there shouting for him to be crucified later on. So that was maybe surprising in that sense. How might we have reacted? We're such a wide array of things. Maybe we would have sloughed it off. Well, that's not really our job. Take care of that. Maybe we would have said, they brought it on themselves, or maybe they deserve where they are in life. Maybe they weren't just kind of carnal, selfish things. Maybe we would have thought that. I don't know. We weren't there, but just some ideas.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just even thinking about, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Group 1. If there's other things y'all want to say, feel free to jump in. I'm just thinking, those words, I'm struck by that in this moment. Helpless and harassed, weary and scattered, distressed and dispirited, picturing who that would describe, okay? And there's a couple things about it. One is we may have a certain picture of the people in our society that are distressed and dispirited. And as Stephen's saying, I think however you picture who those people are, it is not always our first inclination to be moved for compassion, right? To embrace them or to spend time with them or to seek them out, okay? Oftentimes we want to keep our distance, right? So that's kind of one thought that's coming to mind, and Jesus obviously shows us the opposite reaction to that. The other thing that comes to mind is that, again, these words describe, I think, everybody who's outside of Christ. Sometimes we have a tendency to look around and think, oh, these people have their lives together, okay? Yeah, they're not, maybe Christians in the exact way that we would, want them to be, but hey, they got their lives together, they're good, they just need to correct a few different things, then they'll be on the right track. But thinking about people in these terms, thinking about anyone outside of Christ as not having the peace and the comfort and the wisdom, and that they are, like these crowds, helpless, harassed, weary, scattered, distressed, and dispirited. And then, of course, again, being moved by that. Okay. Other things you want to say about this, Stu?
In verse 37, the other fact or point that he's making is that there's lots of people in that situation. And lots, and yet the workers that he does have are really few.
Yeah. Lots of people out there, a few workers. Stephen?
I think something else that struck me as you're speaking about this is he was speaking to those who would have thought they had their life together, possibly, and spiritually.
Yeah.
Maybe not physically, maybe they needed healing, possibly, but maybe they thought that they were right with God.
Sure.
In their relationship.
Yeah, we're the chosen people, right? Yeah, we're good. We have the covenants, we have the law. All that stuff could be playing in. Yeah, cool. All right, group 2, and I'm actually thinking in the moment we probably should have read the first group's passage, but let's read here from Matthew 14, 13 to 16. Familiar story here. But by the way, and this actually came up in our discussion, Seth and Jenny and I were talking about this, but notice right before this, John the Baptist has just been put to death. Right, so don't lose that from the context here. But Matthew 14, verse 13, Jesus heard this news about John. He withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore and saw a great crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place. The day is now over. Send the crowd away to go to the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." And we know how that story plays out. And then one other verse similar in Matthew 15, verse 32. He says, Jesus called the disciples to him and said, "I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. I'm unwilling to send them away, lest they faint on their way." Okay, so group 2, what did y'all talk about in terms of Jesus' reaction to this situation? Yeah, Jenny?
As me and you talked about, I think Jesus, he withdrew to a lonely place, a desolate place, because he was grieving, he was going through his own movement. But then, when the crowd followed him and they came to him about their needs, he put all of his needs aside and was, had compassion, and was moved with the compassion for them and their needs.
Yeah. Man, isn't this hard to do? I mean, this is one of the most surprising to me, okay? Grief for the loss of, as y'all know, not just a co-worker in the kingdom work they were doing, but a family member, right? John was his cousin, someone he was close with, okay? And he's grieving this loss, and yet when the crowds show up, right? And you read this and you just want to, get on to these people to say, don't you know Jesus needs some alone time? I mean, be more considerate of his needs and his grief and his sorrow. And yet, as Jenny said, he puts away his concerns in that moment and is just hurting. And again, that's the language of the text, compassion for the crowds. And what does he do in response? He actually does a couple different things. He heals their sick, and then, of course, he gets his disciples together to feed these crowds. Other things y'all talked about, anybody in group 2 want to share in y'all discussion about Jesus in this moment here?
I think it's important to note that it says he was moved with compassion and care, but really that care was not just something he felt internally, but something he manifested in the way he reacted. And that's often an area where, at least speaking for myself, I can feel badly about someone's situation, but I may not take the time or spend the energy to go out and do something about it.
Thank you for saying that, Kyle. And I think Kyle has touched on the two critical elements here, okay? Because one of you maybe was even thinking it, right? But we could make the other comment as well, think sometimes, and it's true, of course, love is an action, love is a verb, and so sometimes we're I think have a tendency to want to remove the feeling from it. You say it's not about feelings, it's not about, like in marriage, it's not about being in love, it's about serving in love. I'm not taking away any of those right and true principles, okay? The word compassion literally means with feeling, okay? Compassion, passion, feeling. Sympathy is a related word with pathos, right? With feeling, okay? Sometimes in the Bible text, words like compassion or whatever actually talks about the bowels, right? Bowels of compassion, okay? I can't remember. I guess it's maybe y'all, someone may know. I'm forgetting here. It's like the liver or the kidney is in the ancient world. They thought that was the seat of your emotion, right? So it's your bowels are hurting, okay, or you're feeling something in you. I mean, all that to say, you're like, this has gotten a really weird direction here, okay? All that to say, the word compassion, it's a word that means feeling, okay? Something that Jesus from the inside, okay, felt, okay? It hurt him, it panged him. And yet, like Kyle rightly points out, it's that plus he then did something. So we need to all be, again, introspective about ourselves. Which of those are we more likely to lack in? Are we people who we need to feel more? We need to be a little bit more human and feel the pain of other people, allow their pain to hurt us. Okay, is that where I'm falling short? Or am I falling short on the other side where I'm hurting all day for people, but I need to do something about it. I need to act. Okay? So we may be in one of those two camps. All right, thank you, Group 2. And Group 3, Mark 1. Let's read that story real quick, and you can tell us about it. Mark 1, 40 to 42. Mark 1, 40 to 42 says, "And a leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling said to him, 'If you will, you can make me clean.' Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, 'I will be clean.' And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean." Okay, and then he told him not to tell anybody, and the guy doesn't listen. Group 3, what did y'all talk about with the Jesus and the leper here?
Well, obviously Jesus is moved with compassion because he sees this man, a leper, right? Who's suffering that leprosy. His body's covered in boils. Again, the thing that sticks out about this man is he implores Jesus, "Hey, if you will, I would be cleansed." Like he stepped up to him in faith, and Jesus, no hesitation, he sees him in the suffering, looks him in the eye, and just is moved with compassion, and immediately reaches out and heals him right on the spot. So he's moved to heal the man, but just you don't see any hesitation in him, right? He just sees this man suffering, and to just immediately react and to heal the man is one thing. But then you add in the fact that the man was a leper. Right, so obviously we know culturally to the Jews, lepers are unclean, they're undesirable, they're untouchable, right? So to reach out and touch the man, that's saying a lot. He's not even supposed to be in the city with him, let alone putting hands on him, right? Yeah. So for Jesus to let that compassion move him beyond the cultural boundaries or expectations, right? That's something that you say, why might it be surprising? I guarantee you it shocked every Jew that saw it, right?
Yeah.
And so to us, as Brother Stu mentioned when we were talking about this, we kind of have to check ourselves on that too, right? So we don't necessarily have lepers that we send outside the city gates these days, but we do have people that socially maybe we don't like, we don't get along with, whatever. And are we letting those kind of mental barriers prevent us from reaching out with compassion to somebody that needs it?
Oh, thank you, sir. What was your name? Paul. Thank you, Paul. Stu?
I think that I struggle with that. They look different than me. They act different than me. They talk different than me. We're naturally drawn to those who are similar to us. I think this is a good example of Jesus realizing it's not about him. It's about that person in his need and willing to be dirty, willing to step into that person's space and provide that need.
Thank you, Steve. Stephen?
From the perspective of the leper, it seems as though that he's reached a boundary as well, and he's reaching out. He's going. He shouldn't be inside the camp, and he's reaching that barrier and asking for help. I think oftentimes we might not fully appreciate how difficult it is for someone just to walk through these doors to even attend an assembly, or to go someone that looks different than them, that they have their life together. They'll never want to have anything with me. So if we have a better appreciation and have compassion for anyone who we come in contact with, realizing that they're overcoming something too, it just makes it easier. I don't know. It just does.
Thank you, Stephen. And I think thank you for saying all that about this. And what Stephen's describing is real. And if you've ever been in any of these tense situations and heard this kind of advice, it's really helpful to know that the other person is feeling just as uncomfortable or more so, right, than you. Sometimes we go into the situation to talk to somebody and it's like, I feel so uncomfortable, and you feel insecure about that. You realize the other person is feeling just as much that way or more so. What Stephen describes about someone coming through the doors to be in a church building as one example, or maybe even just interacting with you as someone they perceive in their life to be religious, spiritual, Christian. You got your life together. They see your family, and it looks so wonderful. Well, that creates in them a lot of discomfort and insecurity about that. And so, having the empathy, that's an important word today and tomorrow. But empathy, to put yourself in their position and say, they're feeling all this insecurity and all this. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but it's always struck me, the leper says here, if you will, you can make me clean. You see, the leper's not doubting Jesus' ability. If anything, he's doubting Jesus' willingness, right? Are you really going to be willing to reach out and help someone like me? I know you can, but are you willing to do that? And Jesus is like, are you serious? If I will? Of course, okay. But that's the question. He has this insecurity. Is Jesus going to be willing? And of course, Jesus shows him that he is. And as has been mentioned, Paul mentioned this, the fact that Jesus reaches out to touch him, okay? We know of instances, Jesus could have healed this guy any way he wanted, okay? I mean, Jesus was healing people from the other side of town. Jesus could have said, whoa, buddy, okay, yeah. All right, I'm going to heal you, but you just stay over there for a second, and then I'll heal you, and then we can come and we can embrace. No, he touches him in his leprosy, okay, to heal him. Okay, thank you, group 3. And then group 4, Mark 10, 17 to 21. Mark 10, 17 to 21. This is kind of the curveball in of the 4 examples. This is the off-speed pitch, the change-up here. Mark 10, 17 to 21. As he was setting out on his journey, a man ran up and knelt before him and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother." And he said to him, "Teacher, all these things I have kept from my youth." And Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, "You lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." And then 22 says, disheartened by the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Group 4, tell us what you talked about here.
All right, you guys can chime in as well. So this is an interesting interaction here. Why is Jesus moved? Well, in verse 21, he felt a love for him. So this man seemed to be on the right track. He's asking the right questions. What must I do to inherit eternal life? He's been doing the commandments of the law. But he's moved because he knows there's something that he still lacks. What is he moved to do? He told him bluntly exactly what he needed, which is a pretty big deal because he's rich. He's got his life together. He knows there's something that he's still missing. And I think that's what we were talking about with why it may be so surprising, because he was so straightforward with this man. And that can be a little bit intimidating at times. Someone who, kind of like what you were saying, they have everything together. He's been doing this from a young age. And then the thing that he's telling him to do, sell everything. Let go of all these things that are getting in the way ultimately of following me. So elevating this walk that he has of letting all these things go and following him. So how might we have reacted? There are a couple of thoughts. One, could be that this man was coming to him in pride. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Look at all the things that I've been keeping since I was a kid. And he's missing the thing that's still getting in the way. So there can be some intimidation when we come across somebody like this, of being blunt or speaking with love and truth. You're still missing this one thing. And so I think that's where some of the challenges may come in for us.
Thank you, Ben. Other thoughts from this group? Hugh?
I think if someone came into this congregation with the same background and met with the elders and they fleshed out marriage is okay, former congregation's okay, all of these things are good. The difference here is that Jesus knew his heart. I think our reaction would be, you're good. I don't think we could read whether or not he was covetous or relying on physical attributes and possessions. So yeah, this is a different one.
It is, yeah, and of course Jesus has that advantage of reading hearts and minds that we don't have, but we can maybe talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But this is one of the reasons why, again, that list that we started out with, okay, we're seeing the whole spectrum here, okay, and Jesus in this story, he was moved with love for this man who was rich and had his life together from an outward perspective and was moral, right? He had love for this man the same way he had love for the leper, the same way he had love for those who were, hungry, those who were distressed and dispirited, okay? Jesus felt this way for all people. And again, we need to be reflective about, I think some of us, we might look at someone like the rich young ruler, and it's actually someone like that turns us off. And we think, who does this guy think he is, right? And what we want to do is kind of knock him down a few pegs, okay? Which I guess Jesus does in his own way. But he does so with compassion, okay? He's not out to get this guy or to embarrass him. He loves him, okay? But at the same time, he doesn't, as was already said, he doesn't cow to this guy and say, the disciples are kind of like, we want if anybody we want to follow Jesus, we want this guy,
That's what I was thinking, maybe in some degree we can elevate somebody.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, look how successful they are.
Yeah.
And that can get in the way too of love, compassion, truthfulness. When we do see something or when we do learn of something, if something does reveal itself.
Yeah. And Jesus, Stu, go ahead.
That situation, you could easily see how if it wasn't Jesus, how you can see how that person would potentially have intimidated.
That's right.
Jesus, the man.
Yeah.
Hey, this guy, wealthy, great position, power, and he's a teacher in a robe that doesn't even have a bed to call him, and it's not that way at all.
Yeah. No, thank you. And so what we're talking about is leveling the playing field. Is that one phrase we can use, right? I mean, again, everybody Jesus came in contact with, no matter who they were from a worldly perspective, his love leveled the playing field. He saw everybody the same way. And I'll just say that's one of the reasons why I think what we talked about last night is so important, okay? Because in the kingdom of this world, we have all these categories, and there's status, and there's class, and there's, this person is viewed this way, and this person is viewed this way, and there's this group, and then this group. The kingdom of Jesus shatters all of that. And in the kingdom of Jesus, everybody's on a level playing field. Those who are outside of the kingdom are distressed and dispirited. They need Jesus, no matter what they look like from the outside. And everyone brought into the kingdom is, as Paul says, there's neither Jew nor Greek, male or female, slave or free, okay? Jesus is king, and in his kingdom, the playing field is leveled. And so Jesus' love then for all people is the same and is not moved one way or the other by their outward appearance, by their status, by their history or their background or their reputation. And that's something to imitate here. Okay, 3 minutes here, not as much time as I wanted, but I'll give you a few things here, and we can continue to have this conversation, or if there's time, you can share out. How do I grow in my compassion? This will not be the last time you see this, but prayer. Prayer is huge in all these areas, but for compassion, remember that the promise in Ezekiel for the new covenant was that God was going to take out the hearts of stone from his people and give them fleshy hearts, give them soft hearts. So if you're here this morning and you're thinking, my heart's kind of hard towards people that are not like me or people outside of the kingdom, pray for God to be working that heart transplant as he promised to do. He promised to give us softer hearts. And that's a process sometimes, okay? It's not going to happen overnight necessarily. So if I see that in myself, then I need to pray for God to change my heart and to work on me and to soften my heart towards other people, to give me more of that compassion like Jesus had. I need to pray for that and trust that God can answer that prayer, and He will answer that prayer. But also praying for others. When we pray for others, that helps us to develop that care and that compassion for them. The same way it does when we pray regularly for those that are in our family or in our church family. So pray for myself and for others. Before I show this one, I'll ask you, because you probably know. Jesus one time was in a situation where He talked about, there was a Pharisee and there was a woman of, disrepute. And He said one of them loved a lot and the other one wasn't loving so much. Do you remember what He said the difference was? The woman who loved, you remember what this is? It's the formula is this: the person who something much loves much. Do you remember what that was? The one who owes much or who is forgiven much. Okay. If we will give thanks to God every day for being merciful to me, a sinner, right? If every day I will remind myself and give thanks to God that though I was the leper, Jesus had enough compassion to reach out and touch me. If I would thank God every day that though I was distressed and dispirited like a sheep without a shepherd, and yet Jesus left the 99 to seek me out, if I'll give thanks to God every day for that, I think that will help me turn and see other people in a similar way, right? He who has been forgiven much loves much. So let's not forget our own stories in all of this. Get to know people. I'm sure you had this experience with people in my life that, on a surface level, they kind of rub me the wrong way, or I'm just not sure how I feel about them, or, just kind of, what is their deal? They're always doing this and that. But then when I spend time with them, I get to know them, I realize, oh wait, they're human too, okay? And they have their own concerns, their own problems, and their own quirks, of course, like I do. Come on. But getting to know people, spending time with people helps us to develop that love for them, that compassion for them. And yes, it is true. Love is a verb. And so we want to develop the feeling of sympathy, empathy, compassion for people, but we also just need to serve people. And when we see opportunities to work and to serve, to do it. And I think if we're faithful in that obedience and that trust, then God will answer our prayers to help us to develop compassion along the way. Okay? So that's our time, 10:45. I'm 1 for 1. I don't know how long this is going to last, but so far we are on time, and the people back home would be shocked. Okay? So let's take a few minutes, and then we'll reconvene at 11 to talk about consciousness. Thank you, guys. This is fun.